The math was perfect. That is the part that makes it so hard to talk about because the people who made this decision were not impulsive. They were not naive. They were not the kind of people who sell a house and move across state lines without running the numbers 3 times. They were Californians, which means they had been running real estate numbers their entire adult lives, watching equity accumulate in a market that rewarded patience and timing with the kind of returns that make every financial advisor in the country use California homeowners as the example of generational wealth done right. They had a house in Fresno or Sacramento or the Inland Empire or the Central Valley, a house they bought for $350,000 in 2009 and watched appreciate to $900,000 by 2021. They had equity. Real, substantial, life-changing equity. And they looked at that equity and they looked at the California they were living in, at the state income tax rate that took 13.3% off the top of every dollar they earned above $1 million, at the property taxes that climbed every year, at the cost of living that had made their perfectly adequate middle-class income feel permanently insufficient, at the regulations and the policies and the political direction of a state that felt increasingly like it was designed for people with more money than they had or people with less. And they made a decision. They were going to take the equity and leave. They were going to do what hundreds of thousands of Californians did between 2020 and 2023. They were going to sell the California house at the peak of the California market and buy a Nevada house at what still looked like a relative bargain, bank the difference, pay 0 state income tax on their Nevada income, live in the sun, and spend their weekends doing something they had always wanted to do more of in a city built specifically around the concept of entertainment and leisure. They were going to Las Vegas. The math was perfect, and now, 3 to 4 years later, they are doing the math again. And the math that made perfect sense in 2021 has become, in 2026, a completely different calculation with a completely different answer. This is the story of the 6 brutal realities that nobody told the California migrants who moved to Las Vegas with their equity checks and their optimism and their very reasonable expectations. The 6 things that the relocation industry and the real estate agents and the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority's billion-dollar marketing apparatus did not put in the brochure. The 6 ways that Las Vegas has failed the people who chose it most deliberately and most calculatingly, and the 6 reasons that the reverse migration, the California returnees, and the Nevada escapees heading back west or further on to Arizona or Texas or anywhere that is not greater Las Vegas is happening at a scale that the local real estate market is only beginning to fully register. The first brutal reality is the one that hits before the boxes are fully unpacked. The heat is not what they told you it was, not in the abstract informational sense. Every person who moved to Las Vegas from California knew it was going to be hot. They had visited. They had experienced a Vegas summer. They had sweated through a July weekend and still booked the flights back the following winter. The knowledge of the heat was complete, and the decision was made with full information. What was not complete, what no amount of weekend visits in air-conditioned casino hotels adequately prepares you for, is the experience of living in that heat as a resident rather than experiencing it as a tourist. A tourist in Las Vegas in August moves between air-conditioned Ubers, air-conditioned casinos, air-conditioned restaurants, and an air-conditioned hotel room. The outside air is a brief, dramatic, survivable inconvenience. A resident in Las Vegas in August has to exist in the heat. They walk to the mailbox in the heat, they do yard work in the heat, they load groceries into a car that has been sitting in a parking lot for 2 hours in the heat. They walk the dog in the heat, and the dog's paws burn on pavement that has been absorbing direct sunlight at 112 degrees since 7 in the morning. The children, if there are children, cannot play outside after 9 in the morning for months at a time. The outdoor life that the marketing materials show, the pool parties and the outdoor dining and the beautiful desert sunsets exists for approximately 4 months of the year. For the other 8 months, Las Vegas is either brutally, inescapably, dangerously hot, or it is the beige, featureless suburban sprawl of a city that never developed an outdoor culture because outdoor culture in the Mojave Desert is only viable for a small portion of the year. The Californian who moved from a coastal climate, from the Bay Area or San Diego or Los Angeles, where the outdoor temperature is pleasant 12 months a year and the lifestyle genuinely revolves around being outside, discovers in their first Las Vegas summer that they have traded one of California's greatest intrinsic advantages for a climate that demands air conditioning as a survival mechanism for the majority of the calendar year. The utility bills arrive in August, and they are not what was budgeted. They are never what was budgeted. The second brutal reality is the traffic. Las Vegas was not designed for the population it currently contains. It was designed as a tourist corridor with a supporting residential infrastructure, a strip of casinos connected to a network of suburban neighborhoods by a road system that was adequate when the city had 800,000 residents and has been completely overwhelmed by the 2.5 million people who now live in Clark County. The master-planned communities of Summerlin and Henderson and the Northwest Valley that attracted so many California migrants are connected to each other and to the employment centers and the commercial districts of the city by a road network that has not kept pace with the residential development that filled those communities over the last decade. The 215 Beltway, which is the primary arterial that connects the western and southern suburbs, operates at or above capacity during both morning and evening commute windows and during the afternoon hours on weekends, when the entire residential population of the Western Valley decides simultaneously to access the grocery stores and the restaurants and the shopping centers that cluster along its corridors. The I-15, which is the primary north-south artery through the heart of the city, is a parking lot from 3 in the afternoon through 7 in the evening on every weekday and from noon through 8 in the evening on every weekend. The Californian who moved to Las Vegas partly to escape the infamous traffic of the Los Angeles basin discovers that Las Vegas has developed its own version of the same problem, a gridlocked, infrastructure-deficient, car-dependent sprawl that requires a vehicle for every errand and delivers gridlock as the reward for every vehicle trip. The public transportation system that would make car-free or low-car living viable in a dense city does not exist in Las Vegas in any meaningful form outside of the Strip corridor. You need a car. The car needs to navigate roads that were not built for the number of cars that are trying to use them. The commute that was supposed to be 20 minutes is 45 minutes. The errand run that was supposed to take an hour takes 2. The time that was supposed to be freed by leaving California has been partially recaptured by a traffic infrastructure that is overwhelmed by its own growth. The third brutal reality is the absence of a city. This requires explanation because it is the one that confuses people before they experience it and seems obvious to them after. Las Vegas is not a city in the sense that the places most California migrants came from are cities. It is a tourist destination surrounded by residential infrastructure. The Strip is not a downtown. It is a commercial entertainment corridor designed exclusively for visitors and oriented entirely around the extraction of money from those visitors. It has no relationship to the daily life of the people who live in the surrounding neighborhoods. You cannot walk from the residential neighborhoods to the Strip because the Strip is not a neighborhood. It is a highway bordered by massive commercial properties with no pedestrian infrastructure connecting it to the places where people actually live. The result is a metropolitan area with 2.5 million residents and no genuine urban core. There is no equivalent of San Francisco's neighborhoods, each one with its own character and history and walkable commercial district and genuine sense of place. There is no equivalent of Los Angeles's diversity of communities, from the concentrated cultural specificity of Koreatown and Little Tokyo and Boyle Heights to the beach communities and the canyon neighborhoods. Las Vegas has master-planned suburbs that are pleasant and safe and entirely interchangeable, connected to each other by roads and to the Strip by more roads, and containing within them the same collection of chain restaurants and big box retailers and grocery stores that exist in every other master-planned suburb in the American Sunbelt. The Californian who came from a place that had genuine urban texture, genuine neighborhood identity, genuine walkability, genuine cultural specificity, discovers that Las Vegas is very good at one thing: gambling and entertainment for visitors. For everything else that makes a place feel like home, it has a strip mall and a parking lot and a cheesecake factory. The fourth brutal reality is the school situation. This one does not affect every California migrant equally. Retirees and empty nesters and young professionals without children are not directly impacted by the condition of the Clark County School District in the way that families with school-aged children are. But the California migrants who came to Las Vegas with children, who made the move in their 30s or early 40s with kids who needed to be enrolled somewhere, discovered something that the real estate agents who sold them their houses were not emphatic about. The Clark County School District is one of the largest school districts in the United States and one of the most consistently underperforming by the standard measures of educational quality. Nevada ranks near the bottom of national education rankings year after year. The public schools in the residential neighborhoods of the Western Valley and Henderson are not uniformly terrible. There are individual schools with strong programs and committed teachers and involved parent communities. But the system as a whole is not what a California parent who moved their children out of a California school district that was mediocre by California standards expected. The class sizes are large. The resources are constrained by a state that funds its schools less generously than most. The teacher turnover is high because the cost of living has increased, while the teacher salary structure has not kept complete pace. The Californian who calculated that the lower taxes and lower cost of living would allow them to own a better house and live more comfortably without accounting for the private school tuition they would decide to pay when they saw the local public school discovers that the savings on state income tax have a significant offsetting cost in private education spending. And the Californian who cannot afford private school and enrolls their children in the public system is managing a decision that reverberates through every aspect of family life in a way that was not fully modeled at the kitchen table when the move was being planned. The fifth brutal reality is the one that has accelerated most dramatically in the last 18 months, and that is the primary driver of the reverse migration among the California cohort who moved to Las Vegas between 2020 and 2022. It is the housing market. Specifically, the collapse of the assumption that Las Vegas real estate would continue to appreciate at the rate it appreciated during the pandemic migration surge, and the simultaneous realization that the California market they sold out of has not collapsed in the way that would make returning affordable. The Californian who sold a house in Fresno for $800,000 in 2021 and bought a house in Henderson for $500,000 understood that they were making a bet. The bet was that Nevada real estate would hold its value, that the migration flows that had driven the appreciation would continue, and that if they ever decided to return to California, the equity they had banked from the sale would remain available to fund a re-entry into the California market. What happened was more complicated. Las Vegas real estate appreciated dramatically through 2022 and then softened as the interest rate environment changed and the migration flows that had driven the appreciation slowed. The Henderson house that cost $500,000 in 2021 is worth somewhere in the range of $520,000 to $580,000 in 2026, depending on the specific location and the condition of the property. It has not collapsed, but it has not continued to appreciate at the rate that felt like a sure thing in 2021. And the California markets, specifically the Inland Empire and the Central Valley and the Sacramento region, where most of the Las Vegas migrants came from, have also not collapsed. They have corrected modestly from their peaks, but they remain significantly elevated from the levels of 2019 and 2020. The Californian who wants to return discovers that the equity they banked from the California sale and the modest appreciation of the Nevada property is not sufficient to buy back into the California market at a comparable level to what they left. They sold a $900,000 California house and bought a $500,000 Nevada house and banked $400,000. $400,000 is not a down payment on a $900,000 California house at current mortgage rates, if they have spent any of it in the intervening years on the lifestyle they moved to Las Vegas to fund. The door back to California is heavier than it looked when they left. The sixth brutal reality is the most personal and the least quantifiable, and therefore the hardest to explain to people who have not experienced it. But it is the one that the people who are leaving Las Vegas consistently identify as the final determinant, the thing that tipped the calculation from staying but frustrated to actually going. it is the absence of belonging. Las Vegas does not make residents feel like residents. It makes everyone who is not a casino worker or a construction worker or someone whose entire economic and social identity is tied to the tourism industry feel like a long-term visitor in a city that was not built for them and has no particular interest in them. The Californian who moved to Las Vegas brought with them an expectation of community that is built on the California experience of community, on the neighborhood coffee shop where people know your name, and the farmer's market on Saturday morning, and the local hardware store that has been in business for 40 years, and the park where the same families show up on Sunday afternoon. None of those things exist in Las Vegas in the form they are accustomed to. The coffee shop is a chain. The farmer's market is a parking lot event scheduled twice a year. The hardware store is a Home Depot. The park exists, but the families who use it are strangers who moved here from somewhere else 18 months ago and are also trying to figure out how to build a community in a city that has no architecture for community building. A city where everyone arrived recently and no one has roots, and the social fabric that normally develops over generations of shared geography has not had the time or the institutional support to form. Las Vegas is a city of people who came from somewhere else and who are, at least in the California migrant cohort, frequently in the process of deciding whether they are going to stay or go back or go further on to somewhere different. It is a city of transitional residents trying to build permanent lives and infrastructure designed for temporary visitors. The loneliness that results is not dramatic or acute. It is quiet and cumulative, and it sits underneath every other calculation, like the specific sadness of being in a beautiful, sunny, tax-advantaged place that has everything you thought you wanted and nothing that feels like home. The people who are leaving Las Vegas are not failures. The people who are staying are not wrong. Both groups ran the numbers and arrived at different conclusions based on their specific circumstances, their specific tolerance for the realities this video has described, and their specific attachment to the life they had before versus the life they have now. But the reverse migration is real, and it is documented, and it is being driven by the same force that drives every consumer migration story. The gap between what was promised and what was delivered has become wide enough that a meaningful percentage of the people who made the promise-based decision are now making the reality-based one. Las Vegas promised California migrants freedom from state income tax, affordable real estate, abundant entertainment, and a lifestyle upgrade. What it delivered was a desert summer that requires air conditioning as a survival necessity, a traffic grid that replicates the worst of the California driving experience without any of the California scenery, a suburban sprawl that has no genuine urban core and no architecture for community, a school system that falls short of what California families expected, a housing market that appreciated into and then partially out of the range where the return to California calculation makes clean financial sense, and a social environment that is profoundly good at processing visitors and profoundly poor at welcoming residents. The math that was perfect in 2021 has been revised by 5 years of lived experience. And the people doing the revision, the people who are listing their Henderson houses and calling the moving companies and pointing the trucks back toward California or forward toward Texas or Arizona or wherever the next calculation sends them, are not admitting defeat. They are doing what Californians have always done with real estate. They are selling when the moment is right and moving on to the next calculation. The only difference is that this time, the thing they are calculating the exit from is not a house. It is a version of a life that Las Vegas was supposed to provide and never quite did. And the lesson of their departure, like the lesson of the empty casino floors and the gutted loyalty programs and the record quarter at station casinos and the $1 billion spent on marketing a city that no longer exists, is the same lesson this channel has been building towards since the first video. You cannot sell a handshake you have already broken. You cannot market a promise you are not keeping. And eventually, the people you made the promise to will do the math, and the math will tell them where to go next. The trucks are already loaded. The math has already been done.